Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. Today we have Tim. Tim is going to help you and I. He has the answer to solving marriage problems. And I have been married twice, and I need to talk to Tim so I could save my life the next time, because I do believe I would want to meet someone to get married and to enjoy that. But I want to learn from him while I'm single, how I can prepare myself whenever she shows up. So what I'm going to do is introduce Tim, let him talk to you guys. I want him to tell what he does and how he reaches people. And then we're going to go back to the beginning so that Tim can tell us about his story. We're going to ask him some questions and get some answers so that we can learn from him. And then at the end of the show, we're going to go back again to his story as to where we can reach him, touch base with him, and be a part of his following so that he can give us wisdom. So Tim, tell us a little about yourself, where you're at today, and then go back and let's find out, how did you get here, sir?
Well, and again, I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to speak on your podcast here. I love the title Threads of Enlightenment. Just so you know, to get this conversation started, enlightenment comes at a price. Anybody watching this?
No kidding.
Enlightenment comes at a price. You have to give up your limitation, and that is
Yes,
what makes
sir.
enlightenment so beautiful.
Yes,
As,
sir.
as I
It
like to
is a
say, God
journey.
don't make no mistakes. We are sons and daughters of God, and so the point is I have solved the marriage problem, okay?
Excellent.
And what I
Tell us
mean by
how.
that, first of all, is what I do that's different is I
Mm-hmm.
address marriages mentally and
Okay.
psychologically. And believe it or
Okay.
not, there's never been a book yet that I have read that has been written that approaches marriages psychologically or mentally. It's all behavioral advice, like the 5 love languages. And
Mm-hmm.
so you cannot solve the marriage problem by giving behavioral advice. It's unbelievable that the psychology industry is still doing that, and I understand why. But what is unique about what you hear from me is you will learn about marriages both mentally and psychologically, and that is a first for both of those. So can I go through my
Excellent.
background? You want me to go ahead and go through my background?
Excellent. Yeah, tell people how did you get from your profession? I know you were a professional person, most of us are. And then what happens? Something happens that unhooks us from that type of thinking and propel us towards our desires, as they say. Go ahead, Tim. Tell us about your background.
Well, first of all, my dad was a cab driver,
Mm-hmm.
so I was raised poor. Okay. When I was
Yeah.
12 years old, I already told you this, Ken, you'll like this. When I was 12 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a Catholic priest. And then I discovered girls. That old career path kind of got derailed. But professionally, I am not a psychologist. And that turns
Okay.
out to be important. I actually have an engineering degree, an MBA, and I was the first semiconductor analyst on Wall Street to focus on the communications market. So I've had a very successful professional career. But in 2000,
Mm-hmm.
at the height of the market, it was actually a girl that I had known for 8 years. She always had a boyfriend, I always had a girlfriend, and we had the same group of friends, but we got together in 2000 and fell in love. Beautiful.
Okay.
Love this girl. She was the girl I was going to spend the rest of my life with. If you've ever fallen in love, you realize
Yes,
how
sir.
quickly it happens when you meet that right person. If you look back, Ken, on both of
Uh-huh.
your divorces, both women, if they were, real love, you both came together very quickly. That's how it
Very
works.
quickly.
When you've met the right person,
Mm-hmm.
it clicks. But then we started fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that confusion. Now, the thing that's important to understand about my background is I am an engineer. I'm not trained to be judgmental or find fault. I am trained to solve problems. That is what an
Yeah.
engineer is trained to do. And then a Wall Street analyst is trained to analyze. And so when
Mm-hmm.
we were fighting, my whole mission was to figure out why I was going to solve the problem, was going to get us on the same page and get us on the right track. And when we started fighting, it wasn't happening. And more importantly, when we went to the therapist, and the
Mm-hmm.
therapist wasn't helping. That's why you'll hear me talk about the psychology industry. My motivation for doing this was the realization that there is not a lot of help. Men and women are not from different planets. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That book has done more damage to our culture of marriage than anything in the public domain because it's used as an excuse when couples don't get along. So I realized that there is not a lot of real help. You do not solve the marriage problem with the 5 love languages with behavioral advice. But more importantly, Ken,
Hmm.
just like you're talking about the pain of your marriage ending, the pain of this relationship ending for me was it was suffocating. It was
Yeah.
absolutely unbelievable. Not only our relationship ending, but the realization that there's not a place that people can really turn to get help that really truly
To get help.
brings couples together and keeps them together for life. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
me, and if you don't know what a Wall Street analyst does, to be short, a Wall Street analyst studies industry. I could
Hmm.
spend the next 2 hours telling you how your phone works. I won't, but I could. But I did the same thing in studying the psychology industry, very analytical. In looking, in fact, my message is much broader. It's much broader than psychological. The solution to the problem, Ken, quite honestly, is equality. I mean, that is the title of my book. That is what we're trying to figure out. The old patriarchy model, and I know before you hit record, you and I start talking about the church, the old patriarchy model of the church, where the man is in charge and the woman will obey the man. That is what has been broken down. It used to be defined. The man's in charge. The man made the decisions. The man made the money. The man was logical. The woman was subordinate. The woman was emotional. She raised the kids. She was responsible for the environment in the home. Those were the two defined roles of the man and the woman in the marriage. In 1970, less than 1% of all law and medical degrees went to women. By 1990, that number's over half. So women now are just as educated. We all know this, but women are just as
Hmm.
educated. And so women now have the ability, if they're being controlled, to leave the marriage. So, divorce
Yeah.
is no longer a social stigma. There's no social stigma any longer to divorce like there was before the 60s. So what you
Hmm.
get from me is a very analytical approach on teaching couples how to stay together for life.
Well, that's the key. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about the Bible is some of the things we had a conversation we were talking about. One of the things that the Bible talks about is a covenant, and I think sometimes when people look at marriage, and I think it's our Western mentality towards it, but coming from that side, it's a covenant. It's a lot deeper. It's a lot more. I would say it carries a little more force, and when you put a woman and a man in that frame of mind that you have talked about how society put them, you're destined for some trouble. You have to be able to have that partner, that covenant with that partner that is there for you. And so I think from listening to you, it sounds like a partnership that is much more than what we do today.
Yeah, but let me describe the difference though. You bring up a
Go
huge
ahead.
point, okay?
Hmm.
In the business world, have you ever heard of the concept quid pro quo?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for those of you listening that don't know about quid pro quo literally stands, it's Latin and it means this for that. It is literally the foundation of the business contract world, the legal system. What it means is one person cannot do something for another person unless they get something in return. Okay, that's the business world. That's the
Hmm.
way the business world is created. In fact, I know, for example, like I know Steve Jobs when he was alive, and like Mark Zuckerberg, they get paid $1 a year. And the reason why they got paid $1 a year is because they could not take zero, because there's no contract
Hmm.
now between them and the company. There's got to be an exchange. That is a contractual partnership. That is what I refer to as conditional love. I will do something for
Hmm.
her if she does something for me in return. That is not a covenant. A covenant
Hmm.
is unconditional
Yeah.
love. And
Yes,
all
sir.
unconditional love means is you do something for your partner without expecting
Yes.
anything in return. That is what couples
Hmm.
need to learn.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think it's because society has taught us the quid pro quo relationship. And so this is when, and there's no, as you said, it's contractual. I mean, just look at it. And so I think there's a
It's a
symbol.
covenant, though. No, it's not contractual. Contractual is the way most couples are today when they won't do anything unless
Today,
they get something in return. But what the Bible's talking about is a covenant
correct.
means you don't expect anything in return.
You don't expect anything. And so today, that's what I'm saying. Today is that where they expect certain things. And if they don't get it, then they don't become happy. They start looking elsewhere. I'm not in love with you anymore. And all kinds of really strange language. When if you understand what love is, you would never ever make that statement. But it's really fascinating to watch how people behave and stuff like that. But I want you to keep telling us, because there's your wisdom in this is so rich that we want to be able to reach out to the people out there, the ones that are on the edge. I know you had mentioned some of this things that you're getting in your message, and about the pain that is out there, the expectation that is destroyed for both men and women because of the current situation they're in. How can you begin to point some of them in a direction that can begin to help and get them out, at least start on a path to a recovery, but it is in a way? What's your input in that?
If we were to canvass marriages that were not working, I will not say 100% of them, but I will say pretty close to 100% of relationships that are not working because of control. One or both are trying to control the marriage. Okay, a partnership, and the way I kind of describe this, can say you and I become business partners. Okay, I am the accountant, and you want to buy a $5,000 computer, and we can't afford it. Okay, how do you and now we have a conflict? You want an expensive computer? Yeah. I'm responsible for the budget. We can't afford it. How do you and I solve that problem? We solve it logically. You explain your side, I explain my side, I understand your side, you understand my side. We come together logically and we find a solution to that problem that makes sense for both of us, right? Why do you want a $5,000 computer? Tim, how much money do we have? We go back and forth to solve that problem. That is called a disagreement. Disagreements are logical, disagreements are forward-looking, and disagreements are problem-solving. But obviously, you and I don't have an emotional connection like lovers, like a man and woman do in a marriage. But the issue in that situation is because of all of this energy between two loving people, they can easily elevate to an argument. An argument is emotional. Argument is fault finding, and argument is backward looking. To argue with a person who has abandoned the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. Once we cross that imaginary line from disagreement, logical, forward-looking, problem-solving, to argument, emotional, backward-looking, fault-finding, we're at a point of no return. So, Ken, you are a jerk. So now I've just introduced an emotional component to our dialogue. You know, you and I are going back and forth in this computer, and I'm not getting my way. So I take it to the next level, which is started, accusing you, emotional, Ken, you're a jerk. I have now crossed the line, and we're at a point of no return. There is no solution to an argument. But what couples need to understand, let me go through this fairly quickly with you, Kim. What people need to understand is what causes an argument. This is one of my real breakthrough realities. An argument, there's what I call the hierarchy of the argument. There's a process that the mind goes through that leads to an argument. It begins with an insecurity. So say mom and dad got divorced when you were a child. What happens is that now creates a fear in your marriage that your marriage will end because of what you saw with your parents' marriage. That's called an insecurity. That insecurity then leads to a prejudice. I call these relationship prejudice. It turns out our mental problems are prejudice. Again, mom and dad got divorced. Now I have a preconceived opinion, which is what a prejudice is, about marriage based on my parents' marriage. They didn't get divorced, but if they had, that prejudice then leads to becoming judgmental, which then leads to anger. And what I'm doing here, and again, I'm very quickly summarizing, is I'm connecting the dots between fear and anger. If people were to learn that when their partner is getting angry at them, there's a fear underlying that anger. So let me give you an example. You come home late from work and your partner gets mad at you. Think about this for a second. You got home late from work. Now, the caveat here is you were not out drinking with your buddies. You got that phone call at 5 p.m. We're on it for an hour. Did think about calling your wife on the way home. You get home and you're in trouble. Okay? Now, obviously, the natural response is fight or flight. Right? You're either going to respond back in kind or you're going to just flee and ignore the topic. But what you learn is that she is not mad at you for you coming home late from work. It has nothing to do with it. She's mad because she's afraid, because her parent, she's afraid of abandonment. She has low self-esteem. Maybe her parents got divorced. There's a fear underlying the argument, underlying the anger. And so when you come home late from work, she gets mad at you. When you've got that environment that is psychologically aware of the dynamics in the marriage, now you're able to turn the conversation back to her. Sweetheart, I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Obviously, I'm not trying to upset you. Nobody thinks ahead of time, particularly at the beginning of their relationship, about purposely upsetting their partner. It's not till later when they just start ignoring their partner. But when it's still going in the right direction, nobody tries to upset their partner, but their partner gets upset. So you realize that they're not upset at you. They have a fear that's motivating their anger. And so now you can turn the conversation back to what the source of the problem is. And then, like you and I were discussing before we start recording, then you get into the forgiveness part. Then you forgive whatever the source, the relationship or the experience from your past, which is where the fear came from. When you eliminate the fear, you can now look at your partner objectively as opposed to subjectively. And that is such an important part. What that does is it introduced a psychological component to your understanding of a successful marriage. And that's not there yet. Nobody has done that yet. That's what I'm doing. One of the things I'm doing.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I, as you begin to talk, you could follow the dots as you're saying, as it understand, because I remember some of those arguments as you were talking about some of the things there. And the piece that I wanted you to go and get a little deeper into, because you and I had just talked about it, is that part of forgiveness. Because that terminology is used so much, especially in a relationship with a husband and wife or whatever. Oh, I forgive you. But then a couple minutes, 2 weeks later, an situation happens and it triggers and come right back up to that situation that I was forgiven. So I want you to talk about what is forgiveness and why are we missing it?
Well, first of all, the only reason why I can comfortably and confidently tell anybody that I have solved the marriage problem is because I forgave my parents when I was 25 years old. It turns out the most significant influence in a marriage is a relationship with a parent. So that is my background. In fact, I didn't realize at the time that is not a message yet conveyed to the public, and that's one of the biggest messages I want to convey. It turns out we're supposed to be born twice. The first is obvious, biologically, but the second is when we're supposed to be born into adulthood. The bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah in the Jewish tradition, the first communion in the Christian tradition, the quinceanero in the Latino tradition, these are all ceremonies that are supposed to be celebrating our birth into adulthood, but they take place too early. We don't become adults now until we at least are getting into our 20s. We've got some grounding about who we are. We start our career. We get some understanding about who we are. That's when we start into adulthood. But the point is we have got to let go of our childhood anxieties in order for us to be an adult. So let me talk about forgiveness. In fact, you and I, again, were talking about this as well. There's a colleague of mine who's actually translating the oldest Bible in existence that was written in Aramaic. Jesus spoke Aramaic. He didn't speak English. And one of the things this guy discovered is when they translated forgiveness from Aramaic to Greek, they translated it to mean to pardon. So when you do something wrong to me and I'm angry at you, me forgiving you means that I pardon you. But as you just pointed out, that does not clear up the anxiety, because now a couple weeks later something triggers me and I'm anxious about you again. What Jesus literally said was that forgiveness means to cancel. So it's not until I cancel the anxieties that were created when I perceive you doing something wrong to me, am I really forgiving you? So let me give you the example of my story, because this is when we can talk about forgiveness for hours, Ken, because that is so important to understand. But in conclusion, how I forgave my parent was
Mm-hmm.
when I finally understood it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. I went to
Mm-hmm.
my 20-year high school reunion. My dad no longer around, unfortunately. My mom still is. And if you were to ask my mom today about raising her 4 kids, she will tell you she was very strict on them. And I
Mm-hmm.
was at my 20-year high school reunion and I was talking to one of my classmates and I made some comment about my parents and he looked at me and goes, "Oh, that's right. You had the strict parent." And you know, Ken, that was the first time that I realized that when I was in high school, I never thought about anybody else but me.
Mm.
That's the way we are
Mm.
as kids. You
Yeah.
know, when you're
Yeah.
a child, you only think about things from your perspective. And the more and more I reflect on this, the more and more I realize the significance. One of the things that I do, Ken, is I go through and explain the maturing process to people.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you need to go through mentally and psychologically in order for you to mature as an adult? And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I realize is one of the most important steps in the maturing process that is not there as a child is to be able to look at things from the other person's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that is seriously missing in marriages today. It's all about me, 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 me. You know, if you think about
Yeah.
an argument goes this way: Ken, I'm all right and you're all wrong. And Ken looks at Tim and says, "No, Tim, I'm all right and you're all wrong." That is an argument.
Mm-hmm.
When I can
Yep.
only see it from my perspective and I cannot see it from your perspective. And so it's not until people go through this maturing process or they're able to open their eyes up to being able to see it from the other person's perspective. So let me give you my story to summarize this conversation.
Yeah.
Do you ever get mad at slow drivers?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I I used to. I
Mm-hmm.
have solved that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And how I have solved that problem, the epiphany that I had was when I realized that the other driver is driving someplace too.
Yeah.
When I was able
Mm-hmm.
to look at the slow driver from the slow driver's perspective, it eliminated all the anxiety that I had. When I get behind a slow driver, I just think, well, they're going so, and I no longer get anxious about slow drivers. But
Yeah.
the point is think about that as it pertains to a marriage. If you're able to
Yeah.
understand your spouse's perspective and if your spouse is able to understand your perspective, think about what that does to the anxiety of the marriage. It significantly
Yeah.
diminishes, or completely eliminates the anxiety that exists between two people.
That's so true. I
But
remember you made a comment about forgiving your parents and realizing, looking into their way, and you did it in your 20s. I did it in my 30s. I became an adult at 35 years.
exactly. And we all need to go through that. That's the point. Nobody is teaching us
Mm-hmm.
that if you want to be
Yes.
successful in your
Yes.
marriage, become your own person. A balanced ego is not when you're better than anybody else. A balanced ego is when you are better than you used to be. That is a billion
Mm-hmm.
dollar comment that we are all in search of in this age of individuality, where we are all trying to figure out how to live with ourselves. And we
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
figured that out yet. Well, what you figure out is when you are the only one that defines you. Ken, I'm really not trying to upset you, and I am trying to be a moral person in this conversation. But if you were to get angry at me, you do not define me. Nobody defines
Mm-hmm.
me but me. In order to do that, you have to live a moral life, though. Because again, I'm not
Yes.
trying to upset you. I'm not trying to. I try not to upset anybody, but I still do, right?
Mm-hmm.
People get
Mm-hmm.
mad at us. We are in a judgmental culture. People get mad at us all the
Yes.
time, but I live a moral life, but nobody else defines me but me. So if somebody gets mad
Mm-hmm.
at me, I'm not going to, make it worse, but I do not take other people's data points as defining who I am. And that's what we're trying to figure out.
This conversation to me is enlightening in so many different ways, because I remember having to learn how to look from a different perspective, looking from my parents because of some of the things that happened. I remember having a conversation, I'm the eldest, and I remember having a conversation with my siblings because they were making judgment on my mom because of how she acted. But then when we placed ourselves in her shoes as she was a young girl, what her lifestyle was, then we began to understand what drove her, and that the reason why she was doing what she was doing, not was because she hated us, it was actually because she really loved us. With the limited understanding that she had based from this hurt that she had, she was trying to rescue us in her own way. And And so once my sister and my brother, we had that conversation, it freed my sister from some of the things that she was going through, and even within myself, because we got collectively started to talk. Because I was the eldest, I had a little more information. And when I brought that information to light, that pain that you talk about, it was absolutely, it went away. I believe my sister is much freer now than she was. And she called afterwards and said, I didn't know. And once she understood that, she said, I finally understood why my mom acted a certain way. And it freed her, man.
Let me give you a great example, a more broader, generic example. Okay. In 1970, less than 1% of all law and medical degrees went to women. By 1990, that number was over half. Women are
Mm-hmm.
just as educated as men are. The biggest hole in our society today is emotional men. It is still viewed as a weakness for a man to have feeling. Okay.
Yes.
I had a girl tell me once that her father never told her that he loved her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My dad is the oldest, or was the oldest boy of 15 kids. And I have double digit families going back to the early 1800s. And
Mm-hmm.
so the point is obviously the woman gave birth to all of the children. So the woman creates a bond with the children, but the man didn't.
Mm-hmm.
If one of the kids died, the mother would be devastated, but the father, he's looking at these people as farmhands to help out on the farm.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
one of his
Mm-hmm.
kids died, he just, let's go make another one, right?
Make
Men
another, yeah.
were never taught to be emotional with their children.
Mm-hmm.
In today's world, though, okay, we get emotional with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gay, not that there's anything wrong with it, as Jerry
Mm-hmm.
Seinfeld so famously said, because I realize, this is Tim, I realize that for me to be a more complete man and a better person in a relationship, I need to also embrace my emotional side. I cry all the time. It's easy for me to cry. I'm working more and more on being an emotional guy. How is a guy supposed to relate to his emotional wife unless he's emotional as well? That's one of the reasons why communication
Yes.
breaks down between a man and woman, because a logical conversation is completely different than an emotional one.
Yeah, I remember in my second marriage, my wife would be crying. I'd come in and she'd be crying. And I'm looking at her crying. And now, as my mind, logical mind, start looking at the situation, why are you crying? Logically,
Fix it.
and I
Yeah,
don't
fix it.
know. And so I'm like, there must be a reason why. What's the cause? And so I'm going to this logical argument now to try and find out what it is, what happened, how can we end stop it so it doesn't happen again. And she would look at me and say stuff like, just hug me. And I'm like, I couldn't get that. I'm like, just hug you, but you're still crying. So why were you still crying? So I'm hugging and asking, so why so I get it, because they tell us that that we are not supposed to be that way. I get it.
One of the biggest pieces of advice that I give guys is that when your woman comes, your wife comes home, bad day at the office, one of her girlfriends that have upset her, she's emotional, just like you just described. She's not
Mm-hmm.
looking for a logical answer. She's looking
Mm-hmm.
for emotional support. The reason why girls have girlfriends is because they don't get that emotional support from their husbands. So they have to get it from their girlfriend. And so what I teach men is exactly what your wife asked you. Put your arm around her. Stay in that emotional state. She's not looking.
Mm-hmm.
This is women. This is how women are. They are comfortable being emotional. This is more of their state than it is our state. And we, in order to be able to relate to them, need to be more emotional, so that when they're getting emotional, we're not getting logical. We're coming at their level so that we can relate to what they're going through. In order for us to do that, we have to be emotional too. There's nothing wrong with the guy crying. That's probably what you've learned from that experience, though, Ken, is to be an emotional guy.
Oh yeah, I had to learn that, how to be in that moment, as you said, how not to say a word, and it's contrary to your thinking, because again, you almost have to put duct tape on your mouth and just hug and just don't say a word. And so I had to learn that, and it took some time. I mean, it took a while well, I'm not going to be lying for me to say I instantly got that. It took years to figure that out. And so there was a point then when I began to do that. I think one of the greatest things she ever said to me was that I am one guy that is in touch with his female side. So I thought that I was growing, maturing, in other words.
And again,
So,
that's not a weakness. That is the point. It's not a weakness for a man to be emotional. We've got to get past that in order for our relationships to be more successful.
man, I'll tell you something, Tim. There's so much to do. I'm gonna have to bring you back. So we're gonna have to have like a
Please.
part 2, part 3, part 4, that kind of thing, because there's a lot of pain out there with couples and marriages that are not, where it needs to be. And I want to be that my platform would be an avenue that you can come and talk to the people that listen to Threads, so that they can have that part of their relationship even stronger. And I want people to get in touch with myself, get in touch with Tim, and I'm going to put up all of his information and let us know that, hey, I heard a conversation with you guys, and guess what? It did something to me. I began to look at my wife differently, my husband differently. We want to hear these kind of things. I'm sure Tim does, because, but I'm sure more than anything else is the excitement that he would know and receive from the fact that it saved the relationship. So you guys need to get in touch with us and let us know. I'm going to give you guys Tim's stuff. And again, Tim, I want to thank you for coming. And I promise we're going to have a couple of interviews because this information needs to be out there, and it needs to be out there constantly, because I know a lot of people personally that are in pain, and I want to be able to give this information so to save some of my friends' relationship, man.
I appreciate that. Again, this is very important. As I said earlier, one of my motivations for doing this is the realization that there's not a lot of help out there for people looking to finally figure out how to make their marriages successful. And I can do that. I can bring to light what needs to be understood in order for that marriage to be successful. I'm putting my foot down. It's about time that there's a body of knowledge out there that when people learn that body of knowledge, they will have the keys and understanding how to make their relationship last for a lifetime. That's about time. Think about all the advancements that we've made, globally with our cell phones and computers and all the stuff that we've done. Yet nobody has been able to crack the code of a successful marriage. That's in essence what I've done. So again, I can't thank you enough for giving me an opportunity. And you're darn right, we can do this as many times as you want, Ken.
Oh, we definitely will. And I'm going to tell you that this is not just for married people at all. This is for everybody. I think single people need to hear this message, because, as I mentioned to you, I believe it'll prepare them for that relationship. And having this knowledge, without this information, you go into an argument. It's done. But with this knowledge, you're able to now approach that quote unquote argument from a different point of view with different information that you can.
Well, I eliminate arguments.
Salvage.
That's what I'm doing. I'm eliminating arguments from the marriage.
Yes. So I can't wait. Again, thank you so much, Tim. And we're definitely going to do this again. I'm going to put this package up to get a suite. I'm going to send you so you can hear what it sounds like. Also, send me all of your stuff. I got anything else you want me to put it, and I'll put it on my platform for my people to get their hands on your information, because it's necessary. And I'm excited that we had this. Thank you so much, sir, for coming, giving me some insight that I can use for my next relationship.
Beautiful.
Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves often invisible to us in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials to find out who you truly are and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you, but always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe, and if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.